Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday still for like 30 more seconds, then it's Warhammer. And that means it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. So, here we are. It's
Vince,
been a
you
heck of a
broke
day.
the internet. You broke the internet.
That's what happened. Yeah. It's been a long day. I've obviously just come home from a trip. I was called away for business quite suddenly. And here we are. But we're not going to not do a show. So there you go. And then right as soon as I was about to start it up, Tom's internet decided to die. Still not totally working. So he's doing this from his phone. So right out of the gate, we're just going to say it's going to be one of the worst shows in a long time. That's how it is. So I apologize in advance. That don't expect A quality here, nor B, nor C. Get as far down the letter grade as you can go. But we're still doing the show. We're not going to not do the show. We haven't missed a week yet. We're not starting now. Forget sleep.
This is going to be like...
Forget everything else. We're doing this show.
It's going to be like an incomplete grade.
Look, no. Well, I mean, maybe. I don't want who knows? Look, it's been a long day. I've driven like 7 hours. I've been stuck in traffic for an hour. I've been presenting things for like 8 hours today. I've been up since 6 in the morning. So let's talk about Warhammer. I mean, I think it sounds like a great idea. So let's start with the news.
I can't pull anything up because I don't have the internet.
Okay. I can. Unfortunately, I did make good use of this time.
So I do know we have an image from the rumor mill.
Let's start with the rumor engine.
Okay, so how about you pull that up? That looks like the forearm hook off of the Tenebral Shard from the Warhammer quest.
Okay, hold on, I'm sharing.
I don't know if you have the comparative image or not. I had it, but I don't have it anymore. Like if you look at the forearm hook of the Tenebral Shard, that is what's on his wrist, basically, or something very close to that.
It's not quite as far looped, is it? I don't have it right.
It's really close. Like it's wicked hooked. I don't know how else to say that.
It's wicked hooked.
It's wicked hooked.
Yeah,
that's my Boston accent.
Yeah, I mean, so this is elves, right? I mean, you're looking at elves here.
Yeah, it's always elves.
It's always elves. It's always elves. The elvish army is always coming. It's the army of the future, and it always will be.
I will also accept undead pirates.
That has been rumored. That got thrown out in a random Facebook comment
by the Warhammer team. Well, hold on. And then on the most recent community article, they mention it again. That's what's coming tomorrow.
Yes, and so what this is we actually do have this confirmed of what it is. So one of the attacking forces of, I think, the Greywater Fastness. Okay.
No, the Greywater Fastness is a order force.
No. It's not that. Look, we know that there are enemy allegiances that are going to be in the Firestorm,
and those are associated. There are allegiances associated with cities and warlords.
The death one is going to be the undead pirates one because it can work for Nighthaunt, Soulblight, or whatever else. Blah blah blah.
Do we have any more information about it? Do you know?
No, I know nothing else about it other than the undead pirates thing will be the allegiance ability for death, and it will be. I know they said Nighthaunts, Soulblight, and somebody else. I don't remember who the somebody else is. I apologize. I'll try to look. We're throwing this together kind of quick, folks. And so that
probably
will be
deadwalkers, like zombies and mages.
I don't know. Yeah. But the point is that it will be that's where the undead pirates. So it's a layered on allegiance ability for those death allegiance factions. Does that make sense? In the same way that these have been for these various order armies, the death one are the undead pirates raiding the Greywater Fastness. Does that make sense?
Okay, so these are enemies of the Greywater Fastness.
Yes, correct.
Okay, got it.
Does that travel? You understand what I mean?
Yeah, no, makes total sense.
Well, which we should lead to probably the thing we should start out with, since we started with the rumor engine, we jumped right past it. But that is that Firestorm goes on pre-order this week. This weekend. I mean, obviously, we're
it does.
into it now. So we've had it officially. Like that kind of came up quick. We've got Firestorm, the actual box, and I think it got confirmed for $65 US. Is that? I think that sounds right.
Yep. Yep.
It'll be the map campaign stuff as well as, you know, the rules for like these allegiances and things like that. So I think they said 10 allegiances in the book of both
Yep.
the cities and the people attacking the cities. But I think this will be mainly supporting order.
Yeah, they said seven allegiances order aligned, and then there will be one for each of the other grand alliances.
Correct. So Velatron just said Soul Blight, Nighthaunt, and Death Rattle. Very good. Thank you for finding that for me. I apologize. So I think that's I dig it. We're getting a lot. We're like, what's interesting here is how many of the other order sub factions keep getting mentioned, and this ability to layer on top of these other things. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. You know, these allegiance abilities here have been said they can be used for narrative or matched play. We'll probably talk about each of them in turn, some here in the news.
Sure.
But they, you know, I don't know whether or not they alone would be enough to make something that doesn't already have an allegiance ability and artifacts and all of that competitive. My guess would be no. My initial feeling is no. Like, you know, they talk about using it with like elves and stuff, and that's cute. I mean, I'm sure it is. It's good. It's better than not.
But that's not where the rubber is going to meet the road on these things.
Right. It's where you're using it with, say, Stormcast or Free Peoples or somebody like that. That's already probably either fairly or darn competitive, and then you have this extra layer on top.
Yeah, right? Like, so let's talk about some of what is coming, basically, with these, like, the ones that we know. Okay.
Yep. So we've got, well, first we should mention the 3 box sets also go on pre-order. They're 175. You know, one of them
170.
is
170.
Oh, 170. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So they're and you know, we've got one of them is a mix of dwarves and Stormcast. One is a mix of
dispossessed,
dwarves and Stormcast. They're dwarves. One of them is a mix of elves, specifically of the dark elf variety, like Corsairs, Hydra, Fleetmaster, Scourge Runner, Chariot, and Stormcast. And the other is a mix of Free Peoples and Stormcast, Huracanum, you know, various free guild, non-sensory, etc.
One of the distributors said that there's going to be 2 waves of these.
Okay, interesting.
Boxes. We don't know if the second wave is just a restock of these 3 boxes, or if the second wave is another round of boxes. So just a heads up.
Well, let me say it does make sense. Like, I would like to see that. Like, first of all, I saw some people complaining in the post about this. I wanted to address this. Yes. I saw people complaining in the release post about this when they said, hey, we're putting out this Firestorm thing and we've got these box sets. And there was a bunch of people underneath. First of all, of course, there was like, where's my death? Where's my elves? Man, so fine.
The same.
Like, just the same thing every time. Whatever, I get it. You want your stuff, cool. But the people that killed me were like the more Stormcast people.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, look, like, more Stormcast.
This isn't a Stormcast release. Like, if you wanted to say that about Blight War, like if you had posted under Blight War where they had Nev, right, or whatever, I guess maybe that's something you could complain about because that is actually a new sculpt. But this is the rules team just repackaging stuff, right?
Yeah. Well,
this didn't require the sculpting team.
Yeah, like, and not only is it just the rules team, like, here's the deal, folks. They're just taking things that we already have and giving you them at a discount.
Right.
That's what this is. They're giving you cheaper minis and you're complaining. Stop it.
Right. Like, I'm sorry that it didn't have the stuff you want in it. Okay. But I'm never going to complain about any bundle deal because if I don't like this one, the next bundle deal that comes up, I might like. Yep. And I want them to keep bundling stuff at a discount because I don't like paying retail. And the discounts on these are pretty big on these box sets. Let me just say that.
30 to 40% normally.
Yeah. So what's the issue? Like, it's not new Stormcast. There's no new models, molds. It wasn't the sculpting team. Like, they're still developing the new models. They've talked about how the undead are coming and that their elves are going to get their stuff next year. Like, this is a known quantity. In the meantime, please keep repacking stuff and make it cheaper. Yep. And so, like, my hope would be for, like, a second wave would be to do the bad guys box sets.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. Like, how awesome would it be to get those other boxes? Like,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you could do some really cool cheap big box sets of the attacking forces. And they could be, again, they could be some neat mixes across the different allegiances within the alliance or whatever. I don't care. They're like, great, that sounds super cool. Like more army bundles and discounts for all. Yes, please. So I don't get it. If you want to say this isn't interesting to me, I'm totally down. None of these 3 boxes are interesting to me. I'm not interested in buying. I'll pick up the Firestorm box because I love map campaigns. Like, I am super down for this. But I'm not interested in any of those army bundles. I don't care. I don't need any of that stuff. But I'm not sad it was released. Good for the people who want to start those armies.
Yeah, I'm not buying any yet.
Sure, we'll give him time. I'm sure he'll get on that.
Yes.
The what was it? Which is the Anvil Guard one? Is the Dark Elves and the Storm?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll be on that. It'll happen. I can already see it.
Yeah.
Elves. Your love of pirates is well known. You can't help yourself. Everybody knows that. You've been like, you have pitched 3 different pirate armies to me in the past week.
I have.
Different armies, different allegiances. You're like, no, here's my hot take now on a pirate army. It's gonna be this. Totally different. So you are chomping at the bit here. All right.
That is not wrong. I did in fact pitch a high elf, a dark elf, and an Iron Jaws pirate armies.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure those dark elves will be on your shelf not too long. That's all I'm saying. So anyway, stop complaining about other people getting discounts. That's all I'm saying. And enjoy the stuff we get.
I wholeheartedly agree. Hey, I'm not complaining. Pay attention, folks.
There you go. Yeah, so okay, so that's the boxes and what they cost and stuff like that. Do we want to jump into the individual
let's talk about some of those abilities, because it's a real interesting kind of design turn on some of this stuff.
Okay, so shall we start with let's start with the original, the first one they spoiled.
Yeah.
Back on Monday, because they've.
Do you want to share this?
Yeah, I'm gonna share it. Yes. So the first one was Hammer Hall, right?
Yep.
So here we go. Okay. I'll share the actual ability. Okay. So the Pride of Hammer Hall. And so we should probably talk about how these work. We don't know every detail of it, but what we know is that these are an extra allegiance ability. They get layered over top of your existing allegiance abilities.
And they seem to be good.
Yeah, and they seem to have some kind of composition restrictions over the types of over the factions that the units that compose your army can be drawn from. Right. So like for Hammer Hall, you're allowed to have, Stormcast and this and that and this and that and whatever. Like they list like 6 factions or whatever, right? I don't have them right in front of me because I'm looking at this image. But the point being is that, so assumingly, if you've got that stuff in any combination, if you have an order allegiance, you could stack this on top. Or if you were specific, like say you just had Stormcast, well, that still qualifies. And you could have this.
Clear though, it seems like this, like it may be a little bit more restrictive than that, such that even if you do have an order, like a straight order allegiance army, I don't think any order allegiance army will be able to take these.
No, it has to be compositionally built of the named factions. Yes.
Yes. And so like you won't be able to add allies or keywords likely beyond what is already in that list, in that lineup. Like, so for example, I was super excited about one of these with my Slayers, or with my Fire Slayers, and it became very obvious to me that very quickly that was going to be a no-go.
Real quickly, I want to respond to a comment. Somebody asked Mitch if he can do a Slanesh unlocking. Mitch, reach out to me. I have a week. I'm happy to do the Slanesh unlocking with you if you're still down. Okay. Anyway, there we go. All right. So,
and let me just say, when Vince does that Slanesh army unlocking, it's going to be a treat because we've already brainstormed what this force
got some 6 Slanesh armies. All right. So, okay. So, Pride of Hammer Hall, everybody can read it. I mean, I think
it's the dumb generic one that no one wants to take.
Well, let me point out one thing.
No, don't try to defend it.
It's not great, but I will say that I will say this: certain Stormcast armies, okay, like in a pure Stormcast force, against certain Horde armies in the hashtag Horde meta, could accidentally automatically get the
Battle Shock immunity.
The Battle Shock immunity, yeah, without losing basically anything, right?
Yeah, just incidentally because of the because they just don't have a high model count.
Right. Now, that's going to go away probably pretty fast, right? Because theoretically, those big Horde armies, like, it wouldn't be super unusual at the start of the game for a Stormcast army to have less than 50 models, and it wouldn't, theoretically, in a weird Horde meta against certain armies, it wouldn't be impossible for the enemy to have 150 or more, right? And so, boom, you're instantly in that place. But that being said, that enemy Horde army is probably losing figs faster than you're losing figs, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Otherwise, you're in a bad way, and then so it's gonna like it's going to, your bonus is actually going to get worse as the game goes on,
right? Because you're going to start slaughtering them,
right? Yeah. This one to me is just like, okay, cool, I guess, like, neat. It's basically, I think the way you read this is add 1 to the bravery of all models from this army in the Battle Shock phase. Stop.
Yep.
Full stop. Just cool. The rest you can never bank on actually being the case. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, so yeah. Okay.
In an army that is already generally very well off for Battle Shock.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Order tends to have a lot of Battle Shock advantages. So that one, okay. So are we ready to get to the next Looney Tunes one?
Yeah.
Because I know that's what we all want.
I don't want to say it's. I don't know that it's Looney Tunes. I think that's good.
I didn't mean to say it's overpowered. I meant to say simply it can cause some crazy situations. That's what I mean by Looney Tunes.
Sure.
Which I think is definitely the case. All right. So let me screen share this one. All righty. So, Implacable March. So this is Anvil Guard. The thing we mentioned at the beginning, the Dark Elf and Stormcast box. Not that that's limiting it to that, right? There are many different,
because the other races available are.
Go ahead. Do you have them? I don't have them in front of me.
I don't. It was like Dispossess, Stormcast, Darkening Coven, Free Peoples, and there were 2 more. I don't remember off the top of my head.
So, okay, in the Anvil Guard Army's hero phase, roll a dice for each enemy unit that is within 1 inch of a unit from the army. So in your own hero phase, you're rolling a dice for everything in combat, effectively, right?
Yep.
And every enemy unit in combat.
Yep.
On a 5 or more, the enemy has to move 6 inches, right? It has to make it 6
no
inches.
run. Yeah.
No run, not a retreat. I saw Nico arguing about whether this was a retreat on Twitter, and I argue it is not because it doesn't say retreat. It just says a 6 inch move. Clearly a move happening out of phase in a set distance, right?
Yep.
After this move is completed, any enemy models except monsters from that unit that are within 3 inches of an Anvil Guard model are slayed. Okay.
Yep.
So obviously the goal here would be to catch somebody at the edge of the table, right?
No.
Or surround them or whatever.
You're pinning them.
The point being to pin them somewhere where they cannot, where that 6 inch move cannot get them more than 3 inches away from your models, right?
Correct. Yep.
Now, I want to point out a couple things.
Well, hold on.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry.
What I want to point out is, one, only the enemy models from the unit that are within 3 inches are slain, right? It's not.
Yep.
It's not like the unit gets picked up. So if you had a unit where like it had 20 models in it and 15 of them got outside the range, but 5 were still in, the 5 were slain.
Yep.
Okay.
Which could, by the way, remove standard bearers and any of those other special models in a unit.
Sure, absolutely, because it's those
models.
Yes.
Any models that are not able to get out are removed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This is not optional; it's a compulsory check, right? Yep. Which there are interesting situations that this can cause.
Yep.
Where flyers or various things could jump you, Hex Wraith could move through you.
Yep, and cause
like,
damage
and
potentially.
cause damage. Yeah.
Yep.
So like it's interesting. There are actually negative situations that can happen, and you still can't, like, you can't not check those, right? Like you have to, those things still happen. Um yeah, it's a really, really interesting ability. Obviously, it's fairly unpredictable because it's on a roll of 5 or more. So, you can't bank on this happening.
Yep.
Uh Overall, I found this one to be, people had very strong reactions about this one, right?
Well,
Because of its insta kill sort of element, right? Um,
in the right hands, especially with double turns, this is really scary. Okay.
yep,
Because, so for example, like the two armies that come to mind for me are the Vanguard wing for Stormcast
yep,
with a 30 model block of teleporting liberators,
sure. Who surrounds
because
somebody on a double turn, and then you get your
or
next hero
surround
phase.
multiple units.
Yep, sure,
Like, because with a 30 block, you 40 mil bases with 1 inch apart, you could surround 1, 2, 3 units.
sure.
How many heroes could you surround with that? Does that
Oh,
make
sure,
sense? And
absolutely.
then basically, if you double turn, then all of them check or instantly die.
Yep, absolutely.
And then you can teleport like that every turn.
Right,
Like, it's, like if you had a double turn lined up, suddenly that's a really scary. And the other one that is the less offensive one is the dispossessed with the little like mining pick for dispossessed force that can pick up and redeploy.
right,
Because potentially they're not going to be able to get within 9, so they can't teleport into combat like the Vanguard wing can. But what they could do is, at least if they had a huge block of like 30 or 40 troops, at least surround the enemy such that with a charge, they're now, that enemy is enveloped.
right. Yeah, this is the interesting one because I think that it's hard to say exactly. I will say that I think in most cases this ends up doing almost nothing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Um, like in
Except
fact,
when it doesn't. Except when it auto kills stuff.
right. Like I think in most cases what this actually ends up doing is nothing, maybe even causing bad situations with like getting you recharged and stuff like that, or getting you moved through or jumped over by units you don't want to have jumped over. Like your flyer suddenly can hop over you and
Can
take
I
objectives behind you and stuff like that. But
can I point out 2 or 3 other instances where, like, that we're not talking about here,
sure,
where it's going to be super valuable?
yep,
So one is with any so there's 3 obvious applications to me other than the insta kill, which is what everybody went for. One of those applications is using it to push units off of objectives.
absolutely, yes,
Like,
100%.
to me, that's the biggest tool here, because
Yep,
you can push their entire horde off of an objective and replace them with a charge, with a 5 inch, a 6 inch charge, which is not too bad. That's the first thing or well, actually, you'll move up 3 inches and then do a 3 inch charge. So that's the first application of this. The second application is for units that are going to want to be ranged. So like handgunners, so I'm thinking about like the Free People's Uber blocks. What this allows them to do is to push back the enemy 6 inches and basically get out of combat for a turn, so that
right,
they're not swinging on your handgunners, and then they have to recharge your handgunners.
right. Oh yeah, sure. Very frightening with
Um,
something like handgunners that has a basically a
the
standstill
free shot,
reaction.
yes,
Yeah,
yep. So that's one application I think that Free Guild will run rampant with this. And then the other one is the less obvious one, but the one that's more compelling to me out of all the interesting stuff. And that's on using it with something like a Fulminators on a Stormcast army,
uh-huh,
who go up to 3 damage on the charge.
yep,
Because basically every round of combat has a chance for them to get another free charge.
right. Pushing the enemy they're trying to kill away intentionally, right?
Yes.
And
So then
then,
all their damage goes up. So
yep,
basically what that says is, on a 5-up, Fulminators get 3, all their damage goes up to 3.
right, yep,
Or whatever. Like originally I had wanted to do this with my Volkites, because the Volkites could do the surrounding trick. The Volkites could do the, like, every time they charge, they're throwing their shields for mortal wounds and all that stuff. And they would always make their charges because of all their extra dice. That said, they can't because
Fire Slayers aren't in this.
Fire Slayers are not in the list. So, yep. No, it's interesting. Like, there's some neat builds here, is what I would say.
Yeah, I will be very interested to see how this one plays out and gets played against, etc.
Yeah.
I agree with you that I think, to me, the first one that you mentioned of the pushing people off objectives, especially on a double turn, right, where I can move up, engage with multiple units, and then play for the double turn and hopefully force them off, so that maybe, like, in some of these scenarios, I might make it so nobody gets points in my first turn and I score big time on my double turn, right?
Yeah.
Those kind of things are actually where I read the real powerhouse to this.
I mean, because you don't have to kill anvils anymore. An anvil that's camping a point, you just go stand next to them, and eventually they're going to be forced to move off the objective.
Right. Yep. And that is, like, when I read this, my first thought was, again, much like the last one, only in a way bigger way, everything up to, it cannot run is what I actually cared about. Right. Because like, I expect that in most cases, I won't be able to trap you, just knowing how boards tend to play out. Right.
Yeah.
It's like, you have to have the stars freaking align to trap and literally, like, slay a unit to a man. Right. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. It'll happen, but I wouldn't play to that. But I can play smartly to set myself up to win with the first sentence or whatever, the first two sentences. And that can make real differences without ever killing an enemy model. I've never triggered the kill, right? And yet I can win games with it. That's where that's what occurred to me right away.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the one from today?
Yeah.
This is the one, like, I saw that and I was like, oh buddy.
So the last one is Tempest's Eye.
Yep. So this is exciting to me because my Caradhran overlords are their skyport is in Aquashi. Like, so it's in the realm of fire, and there's a specific mention of that here.
Yep, and they also, like, KO was on the list of troops that they had in this one.
Oh yeah. This is built for KO, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. Like, if anybody benefits from this, it's KO. So what it does is that by default, so think about this like Cunning Deceiver. Cunning Deceiver basically gives Chaos armies that take the trait -1 to hit in the first round of combat. So this is like the offensive / defensive version of that. So what it does is during the first round of combat, you add 2 inches to the move characteristics of any units in this army. Okay, during the first battle round. If they have a fly move, that goes to adding 4 inches to their movement.
Mm-hmm.
And then in addition, you add 1 to the save rolls of all units from the army during the first battle round.
Yep.
This is so good. It is so good. And here's why.
Well, because I love that this is like, it's as though they wrote this one for you. It's a combination of mobility and defensive increase, which anybody who's watched Tom play or scheme any of the armies he's played or schemed will know that Tom likes 2 things: mobility and defense. So, hey-oh, here we go.
Yes, this was really, it feels like it was written for me. Because, so it's going to add 4 inches to all of your ships.
Yep.
But more importantly, all your engine riggers.
Yep.
So now those little fat flying dwarves are moving 16 in the first round. And so, like, you could take your frigate, put it on the line, shoot it forward with, like, favorable wind.
Right.
And now that's going to shoot forward rather than 10 inches. It'll jump to 14 inches because it's a flyer. And then you're going to deploy out. You're going to gain 4 inches on the deployment because the back edge of the base will be within the 3-inch range. So you're going to gain 4 inches on your deployment. You're at 16 inches. And then all of your flyers now have another 16 inches of move.
Right.
Those dudes are in the backfield, adjacent to the targets they want to charge. You don't even need grappling hooks for that first round charge with these guys anymore. Or, like you could almost deploy on the back edge of the board and then be like, go, and then basically utilize, because you have such a long range with your force at that point that you can literally just outmaneuver anybody. And on top of that, the big problem with KO is the counterpunch. Is they have a great like initial like blitzing power, but ultimately they fall apart when they get hit back. And so now all those engineers are on a 3-up base save during that for the first turn, which if you go first, it's during your combat phase and their combat phase. Because this is the first battle round that you're gaining this benefit. So yes. It's really good because the reality is that KO have no way to actually like buff their saves at all. Like it's not in any of their allegiance and any of their allies. Like there is like, I take that back. Technically you could do the Fire Slayer Battalion to run like the blah, 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 but you couldn't be a KO allegiance and do that.
Right.
So I really like this one.
Sure. I'm also surprised you didn't immediately, what were the elves that were in this one? I'm trying to remember.
Swift Hawk.
That's
agents.
Right. Yeah, I was surprised I didn't hear you also touting a Swift Hawk army that's just moving like 60 million miles around the board. Just like at the start of round 1, put your entire army wherever you want on the board effectively, right? So
yes, but the more offensive thing here, by the way, honestly, is suddenly like it was a joke before, but now that 30 block of Shadow Warriors, they're gonna jump up 12 inches pre-game. And they're going to start at a 4-up base save. If you get first turn, they're going to jump to a 3-up from a mage buffing them. So suddenly that 30 block, can actually claim some territory and hold their ground for a turn or so until they get reinforcements.
Right. Fast Shadow Warriors.
Those are fast Shadow. Unfortunately, that they have a set movement. They don't benefit from the plus 2 inches of movement in their free move. Yeah, because it's just a set 12.
It's but not on the next their turn, move. It's they move 12 inches. Yeah,
that's exactly right. Yep. But there's some neat stuff there. Obviously, all the chariots and the griffins and everything is just going to jump forward with that plus 4 inches of movement. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of like everything that this ability is. Now that said, I don't think any of these abilities are actually going to show up in competitive play.
Just because of the armies that they happen to be affecting, or
no. Because I think TOs are going to look at the fact that Order gets 7 of these to choose from, and Death, Chaos, and Destruction get 1, assuming they even map to that sub-allegiance. Does that make sense? Like into the qualifications. Sure. And so the Order will at least be able to find one that they qualify for, whether they want it or not. Gotcha. That's not really the case with those others. Like they will get limited out, and I think that the disparity of like 7 choices versus 1 for all the other factions, I suspect TOs will probably cut it, unless we have more of those like these regional allegiance abilities released.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying I disagree with your point. I'm just not sure I like that that's the case. I think I'd probably rather see these be usable. Like, okay, so the only place they're gonna probably be offensive to me is more layering of stuff on to an already extremely potent army like Stormcast, but no, like Stormcast, right?
Oh, okay,
who certainly don't need any help right now and are perfectly fine as where they're at. But like at the same time, I'd probably
as if their Star Drakes needed 4 inches more movement on turn 1.
Sure.
And plus 1 AC or plus 1 save.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like in the end, I'm pretty okay with, but here's the thing. I'd be willing to say, you know what? So what? They get it. Just to give the idea of like also cool, Free Peoples and Dispossessed and Darkling Covens and Scourge Privateers and Order Serpentis or whatever. Neat. These armies now have a thing they can do. Right. And that's kind of cool. Because I don't think it's pushing any of or most of them over any kind of line where it's like, oh, Order Serpentis just got broken. No, get out of here. Come on.
Yeah, if I were doing an event, what I would actually do is I would say that anybody that is taking the allegiance of a sub faction that does not have an allegiance ability option, that do not have allegiance ability options for their sub faction, and they qualify for one of these, they can take these for free. So if I were doing this, that's what I would do as a TO.
In other
So
words,
like,
if I'm running the Devoted of Sigmar as an example,
yes, if you're running Devoted of Sigmar, you're
I could
allegiant to
take
Devoted of
Vanguard.
Sigmar. Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if you're allegiant to, so it gives those folks that don't actually have an allegiance ability something to to play with.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing I really don't want to see lost. Because we're still not talking about command traits and artifacts and spells
Right.
and prayers
They're still
and
stuck with the
banners and horns and lanterns and every other nonsense thing, right? We're just talking
prayers, yeah.
Yeah, like we're literally just talking about the baselinest thing. And it actually gives those other armies that have, a bone. Like, and I don't want to see their bone taken away. That's
Agreed.
Just because it could, so I think your way is a perfectly reasonable way to do it. So there you go.
If you're allegiant to a thing and you don't if you're allegiant to a sub faction and you don't have your own allegiance abilities, I would they do order plus whatever they qualify for.
Right.
Like one of those that they qualify for.
Yep. And that's, great. Cool.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and then tomorrow today now, I guess, where I am at least, we'll see the Undead Pirates. So there you go.
That'll be exciting.
Yeah, I don't, who knows what that's going to look like. I don't know, certainly.
The more interesting thing is the inevitable conversion armies that will come.
Sure, absolutely. Well, and I like more of this sort of like
fluffy,
narratively driven stuff.
Yep.
Yes.
Certainly.
Yeah, that's what I'll say. There you go. Okay, cool. Let's see. Did we have any other news? Is that all the news?
Do you want to talk about well, no, like that's not necessarily Warhammer. I mean, it is kind of Warhammer, but
not really. No, I know what you're referencing. Okay. No, I don't. I will mention I saw that it's been making the rounds, so I feel like this is worth mentioning. There's a Kickstarter going on for this thing called the Everlasting Wet Palette. Okay.
Oh yeah.
And I saw Adia's site bumped it. I've seen it all over Facebook, and a bunch of people got like early ones to do reviews. Like I know Dr. Faust got one from Dr. Faust Painting Clinic and stuff. I obviously did not and don't know. I use a wet palette regularly. I'm not sure I would pay $30 for a wet palette, but I would say Dr. Faust has an interesting review and is pretty honest with the fact that they shipped out prototypes for all of this as opposed to like the actual finished product. But it's interesting to let him review it because he's pretty open that he doesn't like wet palettes, which I don't understand. But that's fine. So they gave it to somebody. They gave him a pretty not great version of the final product to someone who doesn't like
the product.
Doesn't like the base concept of the product. But he actually gives as per usual with him, he gives a very interesting and detailed review. So
good.
I'll segue right into my pick of the week with that and say that's my pick of the week. Check it out. So if you're thinking of backing this Kickstarter, he's very fair with it. He explains very openly that this isn't the production model and that they have assured him that certain things he points out won't be an issue on the final production model. But there you go. Check out that review if you're interested in the Kickstarter. So there you go. Then that's my pick of the week. What about you, Tom? What do you got pick of the week wise? Yeah, we didn't really think about this beforehand. Sorry.
No. Doom and Darkness did a video on Slanesh, and I'd encourage you to go check it out.
There you go.
It was enjoyable.
I'll link it. It's a good video.
I got an argument.
As did I. We both kicked fights with him in the comments. Yes.
Yep. Not with Doom. My fight was with Redbeard or somebody. I don't know who the commenter was. On whether the banners, the enrapturing banners from different units stack.
Oh, geez,
the penalty to hit.
I don't
And the
even
answer
want
is yes, the penalty does stack if it's from different units. If it's from the same unit, it does not.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with you, but I don't care to have the argument. So there you go. That's what that comes to. Like, whatever,
Sure.
man. Whatever. Okay.
Sure.
I'm not gonna get into that. I've seen very persuasive arguments in both ways. Cool. Neat stuff. It's clearly not clear enough to come to a concise to come to uh a full decision on it. So there you
Sure.
go. Please FAQ it. I'll that should be a non-controversial statement.
Yep.
All right. So let's talk about some hobby time, man. What are you working on? What do you got?
I finished up my final 10 company that I was working on this week.
Yeah.
And so they're highlighted, bases are drying and cracking, and once that gets done, I'll seal the bases and then probably get photos up of these guys. I got all of my Endrin riggers done this last week as well. So I got the Endrin riggers done. I posted those photos this weekend, and I can't share them because my internet's not working. Otherwise, I would share those creations. I got 12 or 9 additional Endrin riggers and 3 Sky Wardens done, and then I've just gotten 10 more company done today, and I have assembled and primed my frigate, and so you can see the frigate right there.
It's a boat.
It's a boat. It's flying.
There you go. All right. Is the boat your last thing?
No, I have my warlord still. So I'm
Gotcha.
saving my warlord till the end so I can lavish attention on him. Sure. And then my goal was to get everything painted by October 1st. So that I can spend a month on the board.
Well, I look forward to you spending a month on that board. I'm excited about it. It's going to take that long just in terms of
like
dry time. Yeah,
yes.
Like on things. That's going to be, it's not that you're actually going to have to spend a full month. It's that like you're going to have to do stuff and then let it dry for a day and then do stuff and let it dry for a day. And
yep. And
I need to repeat.
And I'm going to be like developing some techniques and stuff like that. And I'm waiting for some stuff to arrive in the mail from Europe. And so there's going to be some wait time associated with it. So I'm saving it till the end, and I'm going to do it'll be my primary kind of attention. And there'll be a lot of stuff to paint on it as well. So this will let me actually do the terrain on it to a fairly high degree of quality as well. So I'm excited.
Right on. For me, I am working on finishing up my first unit of brutes. There's a nice little converted, my little champion with his Ardboy helm. And here's just another little brute. They're almost done except for their weapons right now. All I have left to do is the metallics on them.
Nice.
There he is. And these guys. So what I'll say is I love these models. These are some of
I never thought I would have ever heard you say that about orcs.
I know. I didn't think I would either. These have been some of the most fun models I have painted in a long time. Their little faces are so wonderful and expressive and just so full of character. It's ridiculously fun to paint these guys. They have their armor is fantastic and detailed and can take lots of different styles on it. They're like I said, their fate. Hello.
Sorry.
Your computer's waking up. Like I said, their armor's great, their weapons are great, their faces are amazing. The only thing I didn't like, and so I tried to avoid using it much at all, was I don't even know if I used it. Yeah, here we go. I used one with it. Are the weapons with their little hooky dooky extra pieces on them? A lot of the Iron Jaw's weapons are a weapon with these extra triangle pieces
nailed onto
them. Yeah. And I don't
most people color those. They color them the yellow or the red or whatever of the armor.
Which is fine. I have no issue with that. There's one where with this guy with his claw, they're kind of on the back and I actually
Yeah.
don't hate that. That looks more appropriate. It's when they're on like the front of the weapon facing forward that I
And you're
really
like,
have
that
a
doesn't
problem
work.
with it. Yeah,
Like that weapon doesn't work.
it bothers me. Yes, it bothers me from like on a deeper level. It breaks up the the aesthetic of the weapon and its cutting edge, right? Which should be like a smooth angle. But like stuff on the back is cool. I don't mind that. That's just flourish. But the or even having a little sharp pokey bit on the back, maybe for the backswing. Sure, why not? But like I don't like them on the front, so I've tried to avoid using those weapons. I think if I have to at any point, I'm just going to literally like shave them off and because those weapons could have hacks in them and stuff, and who cares?
Sure.
Most of them have like deep hacks and cuts in them already, so I could be pretty messy and chopping them off and be like, it's fine. So there you go. So these guys are great. I want to do a lot of these dudes.
Well, guess what? You have a lot.
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. So I'll finish them up. I mean, my goal is to obviously get my Havoc Force done here. So I have like a list of things to do for that, and then I have a lot more beyond that I'll just keep intermixing into other painting. I'll probably use them because once I finish this force, it'll be time to batten down the hatches and lock the doors because it'll be time to start the competition pieces in advance of Adepticon.
Sure.
In November. So, because I'll want like 4 or 5 months to focus on competition stuff for Adepticon, but I'll need to break that up. You can't paint competition pieces only. And so I plan on breaking that up with additional these guys because these guys are super fun.
Aww, that's like that warms my heart, Vince, that you've fallen in love with your army.
I really have, man. It's true. I agree with you. I wouldn't have thought, how long, like what my stance on Orcs has been.
You fought it for a long time.
But their little orky faces have won over my heart. They have played a warm island song that has melted my icy heart or something like that, or however South Park screwed it up like 8 times.
I love it.
Yeah. So let's talk about Clan Pestilens, shall we? Let's get to the meat of this. We're just moving, folks. We're burning through this stuff because look, it is super late.
We're really not. I mean, like we've spent 45 minutes on news.
That which counts as burning through stuff by our standards. Let me just say that. We did like a straight hour on news stuff last week. Or 2 weeks ago or whatever. So Pestilens. My least favorite Skaven clan to paint and play, who also had one of the coolest stories back in the end times, mainly because I loved watching them murder lizardmen. I have a warm spot.
They did that
well. Heart. Yeah, I have a warm spot in my heart for any destruction of lizardmen. Being a Skaven player for as long as I have. For the first many years of me playing Skaven, I had a regular Lizardman opponent that was the only army he had, and they have been varying levels of quality throughout the editions, but they always drove me crazy. So seeing them get murdered, also their god ate my god at some point in time in history, so I'm not thrilled about that. And I'm glad to see them getting I was glad to see them get their comeuppance.
Sure.
So Pestilens, you had some thoughts about this. How would you like to break this down? How about you start with your overview of the army? Because I think you've got a pretty clear vision of where you see them.
Yeah. So, like, I just wanted to talk about Pestilens because in all the rush of talking about competitive play in the GHP 2017. There's a brief nod to Pestilens, but there was not actually any treatment of it. Like nobody's really talked about it in depth. I know that Domus has been playing a little bit of Pestilens. He broke out some of his and put them on the table, but most people aren't giving them a second glance, and I think that this is probably a mistake. Okay. I think there's a competitive army there. They have some real standout. So obviously, let's just talk through their abilities. I would if I had a computer that was working, I would share a PDF with these images. I am unable to do that at this point in time. But sorry. But I'll just talk a little bit. So the I can't find it in the book. There we go. So their main trait, so they have the strength and numbers ability, which is like +2 bravery for every 10 models, which is good. It's going to do some work for Pestilens, given that Skaven have lost their banner. Like they lost the standard bearer guy that was making everybody battle shock immune.
Right.
And they debatably lost their battalion that also chose a terrain piece and made a battle shock immune. That claw pack, like the pestilent claw pack or whatever it was called from the original compendium PDFs. It was printed in an official source, and it does have points from the GHB 1, but the points weren't there from the GHB 2. And so,
which I'm not sure that matters, but okay.
Yeah, like I would just say that, like, if you're going to use it at your own risk, because I could see TOs coming down on it and saying, like, hey, this isn't official because it doesn't have points anymore. It's a compendium battalion, even though technically, again, it's not, because it's in the Realm Gate Wars, in one of the Realm Gate Wars books. So it does have an updated AOS scroll, and it does have points in GHB 1, but it doesn't have them in GHB 2. So some people may have an issue with that. So I wouldn't rely on that battalion. That said, so the +2 bravery per 10 models is a pretty solid deal for them, because unlike Skyer, Pestilens will actually have the bodies normally.
Especially with just good old-fashioned plague monks.
Plague monks, right. And that's where you're going to have all your bodies. And then they have the prayers ability, which is just going to inevitably crap out mortal wounds all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, do we want to talk, like, it's obviously their main allegiance ability, right? It's
it. I mean, that's basically what they have outside of their
outside of the bravery stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
So do we want to talk about how this works? Because obviously one of the main, one of the sort of the grist in the mill of a Pestilence army is the prayers of their plague priests, right? I mean, the plague priests are their, what I would call, mainline heroes. And because obviously there's also the Verminlord Corruptor, but we'll deal with him separately.
He will become a priest.
Sure.
Like, if you're building this, yes.
We'll get to that. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
This might as well be crap. Nope, lost the joke. Can't remember what it is where priests go to school to become priests or whatever. So there you go.
Seminaries.
Seminary. Thank you. God in heaven. This might as well be a seminary for all the priests it's manufacturing. Thank you. Okay. So anyway, it's too late, man. All right. So their main ability is basically their priests have prayers. You roll a die on X or better. You get to do this thing, whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's just much like prayers for...
It's a normal priest. Like,
right,
it's a normal priest.
Normal priest crap. So they're not dispellable. They don't heed the rule of one, right?
Now, like some of them, and you can use it multiple times. The two base abilities for the base priest, like one craps out mortal wounds, like you choose a point in the battlefield and all units within a radius take mortal wounds, like D3 mortal wounds, which is not bad. And then the other one is +1 to wound. You target a unit, give it all units attacking it +1 to wound,
right?
Which is really good because it stacks. And so you could get units if you have multiple priests hitting a single unit with that prayer. You could get everybody that's attacking it up to on a 2+ to wound.
Right. So then the way the allegiance ability works is it rides on top of that priest prayer ability, where whenever you roll a unmodified 6, effectively is what it has to be, right? Because it's a 6 before modifiers being the most important. That's going to become very relevant in a moment.
Yes.
So whenever you roll that hard 6, you get to trigger one of the sort of great plagues. And you can't trigger any of the great plagues more than once in a game, period. And you can't trigger more than one great plague per round. So even if you've got 3 priests and you roll the hot D&D character of 3 6s, you're still only getting off one great plague.
One. Yep.
Each of the great plagues is basically, well, I'm gonna set aside Never Plague for a moment, okay?
Yeah.
Because it's the fallback prayer or fallback plague.
It's your turn one. It's the turn 1 plague.
Right. So beyond that, you've got 4 different plagues. There are 5 total. You have 4 other plagues. They're all 13 inches, and they're all
short range.
Yep.
And these, by the way, this is all dependent upon who rolled that 6.
Yes.
So you need to roll those independently in a specific order, so that so you're always triggering the prayer on the priest that you want to be triggering it on.
Yep. And they're pretty interesting in what they do but because they are fairly short range and because they are highly unpredictable, right? Like you could have plague priests scattered throughout your army. And depending on where they are, when the one who happens to roll a 6, enemies may or may not be in range. I think that's part of the problem and pushback on this Alliegance ability is
you can't bank on it.
Right. Like there's one of these that is just fantastic at gutting horde units, right? Like that will just wreck a horde unit if you trigger this Great Plague off. Right. But
you got to be near that horde unit.
Exactly. You got to be within 13 inches of that horde unit, and it has to be the right priest that triggered it, and you had to have not used that one already in the battle, and right? So they're very hard to use properly. Like you've really got to sort of think about these things of how you're executing on them. The Never Plague is the exception because it still can only happen once, like all the Great Plagues. But the Never Plague, what it does is it adds 1 to the plague priests, that plague priest's prayer rolls for the rest of the game, right? And the problem, like again, so let's return
no. For all pestilence priests.
Oh, sorry, yeah, all of them, not just him. Yes.
So rather than by default all your priests triggering on 3-ups, they all trigger on 2-ups now.
Thank you. Yes.
That's, I mean, that is a big deal for
But it does not trigger the other Great Plagues easier. Those don't become on a 5-up because it is 6 before modifiers. It specifically calls it out.
Yep.
So they always stay on 6s, even if you've never plagued to begin with, right? Okay. So that's the way the Alliegance ability works. And, my feeling on it is it's neat, but very hard to use properly. I'll say the Never Plague is great. Like super great, actually. Like triggering your normal prayers on a 2-up could be incredibly potent when you've got a bunch of priests rapid firing this crap around, especially when we get to a couple of the artifacts later.
Yeah. So what I would say is this: I think that I would go as far as to say is that the Great Plagues don't matter.
Sure.
And so when I talk about this being a potentially competitive army, like I am taking the Great Plagues completely off the table. I don't care about them. I don't care what they do.
Yeah. I want to address something real quick. I don't wear ties ever. Ties. There was a comment about not wearing a tie. I don't wear ties. Ties are not to be worn. They reduce blood flow to the brain and are unhealthy for you. Michael Weston solved this problem with Burn Notice. The Miami look is in. Ties are dead. Let it go. Okay. So continuing on with the actual show and not the fashion review. Now, do you want to talk about command traits? Because there's command traits.
Yeah, there are. I just want to tease out. I think. I want to tease out 2. Because in my opinion, when I look at this, there are 2 right answers.
I agree. I bet we have the same 2, but go ahead.
The first is Master of Rotten Ruin. And you could just ignore that first line. Which is like if the general's a priest, they blah blah blah. Don't worry about that because you're never gonna. You can reroll. You're never going to give this to a priest because the other one is if they're not a priest, they gain the pestilent prayers ability of the plague priest war scroll.
Right.
So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take a Vermin Lord Corruptor because that's the right answer for this army.
Sure. And who's only 220 points, by the by.
Yes, he's a great buy. He's a wizard, so he adds a true wizard to your army.
Yep.
And he has a mortal wound spell, another source of mortal wounds, and I'll get to this here in a minute.
He's got a great horde killer mortal wounds spell, moreover. Yes.
Yeah, and let me just say, this army is just shits mortal wounds.
Sure.
Okay. And like I think that's like if people aren't looking for it, they don't realize what is there with how many mortal wounds this army spits out. Now, a lot of them are splash mortal wounds, but when you're splashing 20, 30 mortal wounds, that's going to kill stuff. And so what this is going to do is it's going to give another roll. It's going to give your Corruptor, who's already casting spells in the hero phase, will now also cast prayers in the hero phase. And the prayers he gets is either the mortal wounds, the D3 mortal wounds, in an area, or the +1 to wound.
Right.
So it adds prayers to your general, which is what matters, because everything else is going to have prayers already. Your plague furnaces and your priests on foot, all of them are going to have prayers, and so it's kind of the go-to, for my opinion, for the Master of Wrought Ruin. Okay, and the other one is Architect of Death, and what it does is you're going to reroll wound rolls of 1 for attacks made with missile weapons by friendly Pestilens units that are within 6 inches of the general. You're going to take this if you have a battery of plague claw catapults.
Right.
Yep. And this is going to help mitigate the missing or the not wounding of the plague claws, because it's painful with only one shot, and so you can definitely get 6 plague claws within 6 inches of a general. Or not 6 plague claws, 4 plague claws within 6 inches of the general.
I support 6. I guess we're talking about a very large battle here, but
no, you could do 4.
All the claws,
3 or 4,
sure. Very
reasonably. And so, in my opinion, that's like the 2 different ways to go. And then standout artifacts. I just want to mention one of these.
What you're looking for is the Liber Bubonicus is another.
I'm sorry. There's 2 of these that I want to mention. Yeah. One is the Liber Bubonicus, which a model can use the Pestilent Prayers from the Plague Priest War Scroll. If this model is a Plague Priest, then it can use the Pestilent Prayers ability twice in each of your hero phases.
Yep.
So you're going to give it to probably a Plague Furnace. And to give the priest on the Plague Furnace not only his prayers that he gets for the Plague Furnace, which are different than the Pestilent prayers, but also the normal Plague Priest Pestilent prayers. Because this specifically says you get that named ability. It's a different named ability, so you're going to get both sets of prayers.
Yes.
On your Plague Furnace. So you're probably going to go do that, and again, just more priests doing what they're doing.
It's also, well, the interesting thing about him is a couple things. One,
yeah.
The furnace being higher wounds and stuff like that, it stands a higher chance of potentially surviving close contact, like 13-inch contact with the enemy, right? Especially because it probably has a bunch of plague monks or something in proximity to it, right?
Yeah.
So somebody's like, if they don't shoot it down, it's going to be much harder to melee that thing down, and you can sort of get it to within 13 inches with more confidence. A regular plague priest is admittedly going to die pretty fast if he's just walking around on foot and within 13 inches and doesn't have bodyguards near him, right? Like that dude's going to get charged and spiked like a football. But so that's good. And also, which means, you want more priests safely within 13 inches when you're rolling. And again, this is more rolls, more chances to get the 6s, more chances to make the Great Plagues actually do something in the game. And I agree with you. You don't need to bank on them. But that being said, I'll take them. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. What you're aiming to have them do is be some sprinkles on an already perfectly functional sundae, right? Like you've got all your ice cream and whipped cream and bananas and chocolate already in place. But if you want to throw some sprinkles on there too, knock yourself out. Sure. Absolutely. What was your other one? Because I have one I quite like. But
the Vexler Shroud.
Mm-hmm.
Subtract 1 from hit rolls of enemy units that target this model in the shooting phase. I'm going to talk about this in a minute. Most people out there have not bought the Pestilens book. I am not one of those people in that I actually bought it. Like I have it on my shelf because I picked up the box set, the Virulent Horde box set that they released back in that first year, like the army box with the Corruptor and a bunch of with a furnace and all the big Pestilence box.
Right.
And the battalions are really good. Like 3 of them I would argue are fieldable. And not only are they fieldable, one of them already makes it so that all your units in the battalion get -1 to hit in the shooting phase, which would include a furnace. And you could put this on that furnace to go to move it up to Deceiver level, -2 to hit with shooting attacks. So we talked about those furnaces, being near combat and only being reliably able to be shot off. That Vexler Shroud may be able to do that extra work to make it very hard to shoot it off.
Right. Yep. The other thing I want to quickly just mention one other artifact, which is Blistrivius the Living Cyst, which just the funniest artifact. So the way this one works is basically you get to reroll hit rolls of 1 for the bearer and add 2 inch to their move characteristic. Okay.
Yep.
Interesting enough. And then this is the funny part. So, which is, by the way, a pretty decent artifact, right? Like that's pretty doing those 2 different things.
It's potent.
Yeah. Starting from the second battle round. So this doesn't happen in round 1, but starting from the second battle round, if there are any friendly Pestilence heroes within 12 inches of the bearer at the start of each battle round, then you must transfer this artifact to one of them as the Living Cyst like hops over to them. Now, the interesting part about that one is that I think it actually aligns quite well with the Corruptor as well, depending on what your aim is with that Corruptor, because it does make him considerably faster. He would tend to be the one who's probably off by his own, not necessarily needing other heroes around him. Like you could rely.
So you don't have to worry about it jumping.
Correct. Yeah, he's probably the one guy that stands out to me that I would probably keep 12 inches away from other heroes, right? So yeah, like just it's an interesting one because you can keep it pretty predictable with him, and you know he is dangerous enough in melee and fast enough that sort of making him truly deadly in melee and faster seems a pretty good thing. And again, the dude's only 220 on the points. Like for what he's packing, 220 is a pretty darn reasonable deal. Yeah.
No, I would agree with that. And so let's talk about the army itself. So your bread and butter is going to be your plague monks. Plague monks are, if they use 2 swords, they get reroll hits. If they get stabs, they get an extra offhand attack that increases like an additional weapon profile. The big money here is the Corruptor. Your general is going to add a +1 to like melee attacks for a unit for every weapon on the profile. So the staff units are going to gain like bonus attacks on both, and then they gain bonus attacks on a charge. So like each model's at like, I don't know, 6 attacks per round or something like that on a charge.
Right.
It's something insane. Obviously like they're all hitting and wounding on crap, but you're just throwing numbers at that point at the enemy. But the other thing I want to actually point out, so those are your rank and file. It's going to be a majority of your troops. You're also going to have sensor bearers, which are generally fairly bad. Like for 5 for 60, they have this like AoE ability that'll trigger on like a 3-up that might do a mortal wound. It's pretty bad.
Well, let me also say they're a third cheap battle line if you need it in a Pestilence Allegiance. Like if you,
you won't
like if you have 2 horde size units of plague monks and you go heavy catapults and a Corruptor, it could be to the point where you see what I'm saying? Like you could be at a point where you need the third battle line, but you don't want to go for another big unit of plague monks.
Yeah.
Those little dudes are a reasonable enough little tiny threat to be an interesting choice.
Yeah, I mean they do have rend. They have -1 rend. But in general, they're pretty bad. Now, I agree. So the funny thing here is that they actually get really good with the battalion. And I'll talk about that here in a moment. So then you have Plague Claw catapults, which are a known quantity. They get 1 shot in a horde meta. They're doing 2d6 wounds on any unit that's larger than 10 models at -2 rend.
Hold on. Let me pause 1 moment. I want to answer a specific comment. Somebody said if someone walked into a GW store for the first time and ran across you, would you and ask for advice as to what army to buy, would you tell them to buy Pestilence? No, certainly not. The army
player,
not a new player. No, definitely not.
No.
I would, and I've said this going back for years. I've played Skaven for 20 years, and I would never recommend it to anyone as a first army in any of its incarnations ever. And I wouldn't start that now. It is a fiddly army with a high model count that often requires a large amount of specific synergies to function properly. That has usually a complex, involved playstyle. It is
you need to know. Yeah, you need to know what you're getting yourself into with Skaven. But in all of them, like a Skyr, I would never point anybody to the Skyr army because it's going to play very specifically. And to win and to do well, you need to have finesse.
Right.
Pestilence is no different. What I wanted to do with this show is to highlight that actually Pestilens may be competitive.
Right. So I just wanted to
that
answer that. My support of
yeah.
this is like I think that this is an army that does exactly as you said. I think I agree with you. I think it is competitive, but it requires probably a deeper understanding of how armies tick, right? Into this. Like just a quick point to put on this.
Yeah.
When you mention the plague monks and the plague monks thing is that they just throw numbers. They shoot ones and zeros at the enemy, right? Because it's just like it's just hordes of attacks. Just that's all it is. They're all rendless attacks, right? It's just math.
Unless they roll six, unless they use an item and they're 6 up to wound and blah blah blah.
Right.
Yeah, like because they all have. And that's we'll get to this with their items here in a minute.
Right, but for the most part, let's just assume they have rendless attacks, massive.
Yep.
Normally, this would mean the army's very susceptible to very high resilient armor save people. However, when used properly with right synergies, this army, as you mentioned, also really does just crap mortal wounds out, right? So you can also...
So those Stormcast...
Yeah, but knowing how to apply those forces properly, right? To make sure that you're using when to hit the right
tool. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be very challenging. So anyways, please continue.
Yeah.
I just wanted to put
okay. Yeah, no worries. So you're going to have you have basically 3 hero unit options. You're going to have your base Plague Priest, which we've talked about. He's going to die quickly, 80 points. He has 2 prayers. We've talked about what his prayers do. You have the Plague Furnace, which is it's really overrated for what it does. It's and most people who play Pestilence know that it's not actually all it's cracked up to be. It's a 12 wound hero model for 200 points, so it's fairly cheap. But the reality is that it's not doing a lot. Its ability to do mortal wounds is going to hit your own troops with the actual plague center. But it's an area effect, so you choose a point on the battlefield within 3 inches, and then it affects an area around it. It can do D6 mortal wounds. So I mean, again, it has some applications, but in general, the furnace is there to be a priest more than to be anything else.
It's there to be a very tough priest.
Yes,
by the standards of this army.
Yes, and let me just say that, and more importantly, it does have one very important prayer, which makes it so that the enemy, whenever your rats die in melee, they get to pile in and attack for free before you pull them. That's a really important, the Berserk prayer or whatever it is. When you have hordes of rats with no save, it's really important that those rats still get their swing on when they die.
Yeah.
And so that's a really good prayer that I think is probably overlooked by most people. And so,
because you will lose plague monks in bucket loads.
In buckets, you're going to just shuffle entire armloads of models off the table when combat comes around against you. And then and then obviously we've talked about the Corruptor and what he's doing. Okay. So where's the competitive characteristic of this army? First, let me point out the battalions, because most people don't know what the battalions are doing. Vince, did you get that email that I sent you?
I did, yeah.
Could you share up those battalions for us?
Yeah, man,
on your screen?
Absolutely.
Because most people don't know what Pestilence battalions are out there. There are 2 that are really compelling, and there's a reason for why these are. Oh, sorry. Let me stop before we go to battalions. I want to talk about one more thing.
Okay.
And that one thing is the Plague Monks have a bunch of items associated with them. A lot of items associated with the Plague Monks. Your hero, or not your hero, your captain gets to choose one of 2 items. Each of your standard bearers gets one of 2 items. Each of your musicians gets one of 2 items.
Mm-hmm.
Most comps, for some reason, are still stuck in the 8th edition. They haven't fully adopted into Age of Sigmar yet. And so most tournaments, even the most kind of edgier full AOS tournaments, still restrict standards to only one type of standard, one type of musician. And I think that's a mistake, because I think Plague Monks really do need the full suite of abilities, because there are a bunch of once a game abilities that are usable in a Plague Monk army. Okay, so I say all of that to say there's one of these that's really a standout, and it's the one on your captain. A lot of them are neat, and I would use most of them. But the captain one, he gets a once per game trigger, and when he fires it off, it does It hits every enemy unit within 13 inches. And on a 4-up, it does a mortal wound.
Right.
Okay. And every single unit of Plague Monks can have one of these.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so we'll get to that here in a minute. But like realistically, you're going to be using Plague Monk units for both chaff and for your big blocks. So every single one of these can have one of these like little bombs that hit all enemy units within 13 inches. Okay, so let's go to the first battalion.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, like it's funny, like there's such a funny kit, the Plague Monks, because all of those items are sort of a fluke of history, right? That
Sure.
when they wrote this scroll, Plague Monks have classically had just a bunch of weird stuff on them over their history, right? They had staves and blades and scrolls and books and gongs and every nonsense thing. And so they actually wrote rules for all that, which I quite dug. But yes, it does mean that they got a lot of weird stuff, and sometimes that can work against them in this particular comp.
Yes.
In I shouldn't say this, in some particular comps. Okay. Where are we starting?
So Congregation Filth. This is the one I wanted to start with. So it's a Plague Furnace and 2 or more units of Plague Monks.
Right.
Okay.
I.e. any number of Plague Punks as long as there is at least 2.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, 2 or more, which means that if you want to put 10 units of Plague Monks into this battalion, you can.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of the reasons why like things like Change Host are so good, is because you can get your drops down very low with 1 or 2 battalions. And what you're going to see is that 2 of the 4 Skaven battalions can do this, where they get 2 or more units in there. And so what this one does, the first one is any of these units of Plague Monks that are within that have 20 or more models that are within 13 inches of their Plague Furnace get to reroll their charges. We've talked about how charges are going to be really important. And so anytime when you get a chance to reroll this, if you have a big block of 20, by the way, making a tail back to your furnace is pretty easy to do. And so getting this reroll is not going to be too difficult to achieve for your multitude of Plague Monks. Anyways, so it's a nice utility, thing to have. Okay. And in the Plague Altar, within 13 inches, it's going to basically give a 6-up ward save to all of your monks who don't have a ward save.
Yeah.
Who have no save, in fact.
Yes. Yes. Hence
this is your only line of defense if you don't want your monks to die. So the actual strength of this battalion is neither of these abilities. It's the fact that you can shove 20 units of Plague Monks into a single drop.
Right.
Okay. Which the reason why you would want to stack monks is because you can, for your skirmishing screening units, you're going to run double blades, like your 2 stabby blades. And then for your super blocks of like maxed out 40 Plague Monks, you're probably going to want to run staff and sword, so that you hit them with the Corruptor. You get the Corruptor's buff, and then that block of 40, like they'll skirmish, like they'll have screening units of 10 in front of them. Those units will protect the block of 40 until the block of 40 charges. This is what we're talking about like advanced tactics. Like you would need to be very conscious of where your screeners are. But you could easily make a force of like 3 of these blocks of 40 Plague Monks. These are only 240 for 40 models.
Right.
And then like 4 to 6 units of like 10 screening Plague Monks that are going to screen for the large hordes. And then when you do that, you have 10 of those, or let's say you did 6 of the screeners. Let's say 7. Then you'd have 10 of those scrolls that you can pop off and do, on average, 5 mortal wounds within 13 inches to all units.
And the key is, when you think about that 5 mortal wounds, you don't need to think about that like, okay, hitting a unit of 40 other enemies. Like, that's a neat thing.
No, you're going to assassinate all heroes within 13 inches.
Exactly. Yes, you need to think about those 5 wound heroes that are running around that just drop dead. Or even if you roll lower, still are now, on death's door and much easier to push over the line because they just took 3-4 mortal wounds out of their 5 wound total, right?
And that was like an incidental bomb that you dropped. Like, that's not prayers. That's not anything else you're doing. That's just, I'll trigger this ability. Everything within 13 inches is gonna get triggered. And this is important because these units of 40, you know, like you're going to spread these out and they're going to be fairly large. And so they're going to have a large footprint. And then it's everything then within 13 inches of that huge footprint. So they have some really interesting splash mortal wounds in addition to all the all the priests that have the pestilent prayers can do a D3 mortal wounds to all units within like a 1 inch or 3 inch radius. And so all of those can do that a prayer, so that you could have 3 to 4 of those splashing out a D3 mortal wounds. Plus you're going to have these bombs. Plus you're going to have the potential of any of the great prayers go off. So lots of mortal wounds splashing. Okay, so let's then go to the next one, which is I'm gonna skip foul rain. Foul rain is the if you want to run a battery of catapults, this is the way to do it. It's going to be like 820 points. It's 3 catapults and a priest, and it's going to give you like pluses to wound and reroll failed hits. So
and
basically,
works great with that command trait we talked about, of course.
Yes, because basically you'll be at like 3 up against blocks of infantry. You'll be at like 3 up reroll failed hits, 2 up reroll failed wounds.
Right.
And then -2 rend and D6 on normal targets. They have 10 or more models, 2d6 damage. So I mean, like, it's a thing, and it's going to be scary when somebody runs around with the foul rain congregation.
And these things will mess up big blocks, like absolutely.
Yes. Okay. So let's go to the Plague Smog, because a lot of people don't know this one either. So the Plague Smog is a Plague Furnace and 2 or more units of those Plague Sensor Bearers. Remember those crappy guys that I wasn't a real big fan of? So the first thing it does is that any of these units, like the idea is that like plague smoke is coming out from all these units, from all their sensors and from the furnace. And so all of them are at -1 to hit with range attacks, just uniformly across the board.
-1 to be hit.
To -1 to be hit, sorry, from ranged hit rolls, from the furnace and all these sensor bearers. So for the furnace, it's neat because you can stack it with that item, the Vexor Shroud. So you could be at -2 to hit, which is a great like duality of death point holder, because you're gonna have a bajillion bodies around this sensor, and it's going to be -2 to hit from shooting attacks. So it'll be really difficult to shift or to snipe off without copious amounts of mortal wounds. But more importantly, what the second ability does is it upgrades their little, like both the sensor bearers and the furnace have a special ability where they like crap out mortal wounds, and it was like normally on a 4 up they'll do 1 mortal wound to a unit within 3 inches.
Right.
What this does is it changes it to a 2 up. Any units within 3 inches of any enemy units within 3 inches of any of these. Let me say that again. Any unit within 3 inches of any of these Plague Smog Congregation units, including your own, you roll dice on a 2 or more. That unit suffers a D3 mortal wounds. Nurgle units are not affected, so your Pestilens units are going to be immune to this. But technically, if you had allies, it would affect your allies.
Right.
So suddenly, like, every one of these units of 6 now becomes a walking arcane bolt that just shits out mortal wounds within a 3-inch radius every turn on a 2 up.
Right.
So imagine a world where you're running like screeners of those the plague monks, and then behind those you're running like these like little units of these 5 of MSU units of these 5 sensor bearers that are like, if you charge the plague monks, they're going to explode, and then these guys are going to start crapping mortal wounds. There's some really interesting potential here for Pestilens, for the amount of mortal wounds that they're going to be spitting out that I don't think most people are thinking about. Because again, a D3 here, D3 here, it's not that big a deal. But now when you're stacking this on top of the Plague Scrolls, and by the way, it's really easy to do a 3-drop army where you do one of those drops is the Congregation of Filth, one of those drops is a Plague Smog Congregation, and one of those drops is a Corruptor. 3 drops, and you can have as many units that you want in any combination from all the core units of this army.
Yeah, unfortunately, it means you're leaving your catapults at home, but yes.
You are. Victory. So what I would say is that the other thing I want to point out, so they have lots of neat tools. The other thing I want to talk about briefly is allies. Because a lot of people haven't thought through what allies look like for this army.
Okay.
But they have a lot of very strong contenders. The first is going to be, I don't know that even if I had the choice of bringing the catapults, I don't know that I would bring catapults.
Okay.
Because for the cost of 2 catapults, I can get 6 plague wind mortars.
Sure. Which I stand behind the plague wind mortar as being
Vince, tell our viewers about
unit.
what plague wind mortars are.
Yeah, sure. So plague wind mortars are the great overlooked weapon within the Skaven sort of armory. These constantly have been overlooked in favor of like the what do I want to call them? The like warp fire throwers and stuff, you know?
Yep.
And that is just a crime because I have taken these things a bunch of times and they're just hell on wheels, man. Okay.
Sure.
So the Poison Wind Mortar team is just a little weapon team.
Yep.
60 points. It's a 3 wound model with a 6 up save.
Yep.
Okay, great. Who cares? Now, what does it do? Well, it shoots these little poison wind mortars that have a 22-inch range. It gets 1 shot, 4 up, -2 rend, D6 damage. So it's spitting out -2 rend, D6 damage cannonball shots, but on a 4 up. However, 2 different things here. First off, like all Skaven weapon teams, it's got an overcharge, sort of option, right?
Yep.
And the overcharge option, they can choose to basically, if they do it, you roll a d6 as long as you don't roll a 1, like all of these things, then the maximum range of the attack is increased to 30 inches. So now these little weapon teams have a 30-inch range.
Where the Plague Claws have 31-inch range, just to be clear.
Yes, exactly. So you're basically getting the same range as the full-on catapult.
Yep. Okay. And they're easier to hide.
They're a tiny little thing, and because it's just 2 Skaven standing next to each other on a tiny little base, and they don't need line of sight. Right. So they can shoot at things not visible to them. So you can just any piece of terrain, any bit of
a bush, arguably a Citadel Woods will break line of sight to these guys.
Yeah, these guys are very easy to hide. Now, the real magic comes when you target big units, okay?
Yep.
Just like with the Plague Claw.
Yep.
If you target a unit of 10 or more, these hit on a 3 up. Okay, so now they go to 3 up, 4 up.
Yep.
If the unit has 20 or more models, which again, #horde meta, right? You get this thing's damage goes from D6 to 6. Just 6. Straight 6, homie. Okay?
Yep.
And again, you can have 3 of these bad boys for every 1 Plague Claw.
Yep.
Okay. These guys are freaking great. I love me some poisoned blah blah. I love these stupid weapon teams. I can't say their dumb name, but I love them nonetheless.
Their new name, yes.
Yes, and let me also just real quick, I want to answer one thing. Here's another thought. These guys have no type, these wind mortar teams. They are not artillery. Okay?
Right. So, you're not. Now, for allies, you are going to be limited on only having 6 of these because that's correct. 360 points.
Yes, that is right. But I'm just for general usage.
Army, yeah.
You can just line these things up, man. Okay.
Sure.
And my God, watching these things go to work is pretty impressive. And by the way, on the just a slight benefit, these were one of the Island of Blood weapons.
They are, so they're super cheap. There's tons of them out there in the market.
Yep.
Yep. I have a bunch that I have sitting on my shelf. So what I would say is that these guys can do some work. You don't need line of sight. And also, the other half of this, by the way, is that because there are a bunch of different units, they have to divide up attacks. Because they're not going to be consolidated in a single spot or whatever. Right. You're going to be want to do with the catapults. And so you could spread these guys out and make them hunt for these guys while they're laying out pain.
Yeah, many times I have just literally put them inside buildings, like, you know, like ruined buildings. I've just literally like stuck them in the corner of a ruined building, and they're just like completely invisible unless the enemy like drops, walks into the building, and then can see them. Like you're shooting out of windows. You know, you're like a World War II sniper over here. You're just thump, thump.
Yep. So, Plague Wind. So those guys, they solve the range problem if you don't want to go full catapults, because you can mix in like a couple of these guys, like 3 of these guys, and you're going to get 3 attacks for the price of 1 catapult as opposed to the one catapult. So that's the other thing. Or you could run 5 of these guys, which is probably what I would run if I was going to mix them in. I would run 5 and save that last 100 points for a Warp Grinder team.
Sure.
Not a Warp Grinder, a whatever they're called.
Which one are you guys?
The drill guys. Is that the Warp Grinder team?
I mean, let's say yes, because Warp Grinder team. You talk about the things that let you burrow a unit up somewhere, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So the other problem you have here is the mobility problem with like putting models where you need them. And that Warp Grinder will help solve that. It's not reliable. Like, it's only on a 3-up, so you're not always going to do it. But it would at least give you the option of deep striking 40 Plague Monks in, because you deep strike any Skaven model,
right?
Or any Skaven unit.
Exactly. Yes. The cool part about the Warp Grinder team is that, unlike a lot of things like that, it's not a Skaven Skyer model, or unit. It's just a Skaven unit.
Any Skaven unit, and so you can deep it gives you like poor man's deep strike, basically.
Yeah. Because I agree with you. The big problem with this army, barring the Warp Grinder, or something like that, is mobility, right? This unit is basically like, yes, it can do a lot of stuff. Like, it can do a lot of mortal wounds. It can generate just a ton of attacks. But in the end, it's a lot of walking dudes, right? And that's it. Like, with barring that Warp Grinder, you are starting at point A, being wherever your side of the table is, and you got to get to point B the slowest way possible. Right.
And so the Warp Grinder helps shore up some of that weakness.
Right.
Not all of it. You know, it's not hyper reliable, but it's there, and it's feasible. You could potentially run 2 of those warp grinders, and then run 6 or run 3 of the wind globe eaters.
Poison wind mortars.
And if you still wanted more range, you could still put a catapult in.
Sure. Do you want to talk about this last one?
No, I don't, because nobody's ever going to run it.
I agree.
Because it's way too expensive. Like, it's just unfeasible for normal match play.
Yep. That was what I was going to say about it. Is I don't know how you ever actually run that last one. So good, we touched on the same. Yep. There you go. Touched on what I wanted to say about that one.
And so there's one last set of allies that I think is a really strong ally option. Because being Skaven, you're going to get all the Skaven clans. And what you can actually also pick up as Clan Pestilens is a Verminlord Deceiver.
Ace in the hole, the old Verminlord Deceiver.
And so, talking about this mobility problem,
right?
He is the king of mobility in this game. If you need to be somewhere, he's the person that solves this problem. Because he can just teleport anywhere on the board, within 6 inches of an enemy.
Right. On a 3. His spell
on a 3.
On a 3.
Yes.
Even I can roll that spell.
And if that wasn't offensive enough, he can do it to Plague Furnaces.
Yes.
I gotta go AFK real quick.
Okay, you go AFK. I'll keep talking. So while we're waiting on Tom, for those not familiar with the beauty that is the Verminlord Deceiver, probably the bright spot of Clan Eshin right now. I'll take a moment to walk through him. And let me also say, if you want to see the Verminlord Deceiver in action, go watch Doom and Darkness's battle reports, where he uses a Verminlord Deceiver to great effect. All right, so the Verminlord Deceiver, the ability that we're talking about here is his spell specifically, which is Skitter Leap. And as said, it was cast on a 3. And the specific, good night, Tom. Could that be louder? If successfully cast, choose this model or another Skaven hero from your army within 13 inches. You remove the selected model from the battlefield and then set it up again anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 6 inches from an enemy model, and it can't move in that movement phase. So that's specifically how this thing is working. Now, the point being is that, yes, he can not only hop his own happy butt around the battlefield,
which he will murder anything he touches.
Well, I don't know about anything. He's a killer. Like, he's a straight killer.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. That dude, he's stone cold, baby. But there's certainly plenty of things in the game that can resist him.
Sure.
Now, he's costed. Like, that dude's 320. He ain't cheap by the standards of these deceivers. Like, he's got 100 points on the corruptor, and well earned, by the way. But yes,
because he's casting spells, he's -2 to hit and from shooting attacks. He's
-2 to hit from shooting, decent ranged attack, good melee attacks with high damage. You know, like, yes, not like
good rend.
Yeah, he's -2 or sorry, -3 rend.
Oh,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's pretty good. So like the Deceiver is certainly a solid choice, and again, his ability to shoot other things around the board, like he can just whip people around the board, is not to be underestimated. Like his ability to just sort of suicide hero bomb people.
Yeah,
right?
And you could feasibly have him and a corruptor and a furnace in a list. Like that's not difficult.
Sure. Yeah,
so
sure. Because your baseline troops, again, your baseline like hordes of troops in this army are pretty darn cheap.
Yeah,
right?
Like the blocks of 40 are 240 points. Your blocks of 10 are 70 or 60. If 60, if you're going with the 5, the sensor bearers.
Right. Yeah, and so there are interesting. I wish, like I'm sure that I don't know if this was intentional or just pure luck, but God, do I wish the Deceiver was only 300 points, so I still had like a solid 100 to take, like so I could have
deep strike.
Yeah, so you could have both the warp grinder and him, so he could shoot the hero, and the grinder team could, bring the unit, and suddenly you could move both of the pieces of your puzzle.
You move the furnace and the 40 block into position.
Right. Sadly, not the case, but hey, that's a shame. I suppose you could do it if you were just going to claim like general chaos allegiance. Well, I was going to say you could do it. Sure. But I mean, I like the Deceiver for other reasons besides just shooting that hero across the board, right?
Yeah.
You'd have to fall back on like normal Chaos Allegiance, which isn't really what we're talking about. But there you go.
Nope. So that's Pestilens.
Yeah, I mean, really, I think you're right. We have gone on about this for longer than I intended to, but that's okay. We covered most of it. I mean, I think that it's
a solid like mid-tier army.
Yes.
But what I would say is that I think that there's a hidden potential here that most people haven't seen or haven't thought about. And the reality is you can buy getting started boxes, and that's your whole army.
Right.
Because you get the two-handed like flails in the Plague Monk boxes that you can use to convert into sensor bearers.
Yep. Absolutely. Like, you don't need to go buy the old metal sensor bearers. They're not great, or I guess they're fine cast now. Probably. The ones I have are all metal, but they're not great models in any.
Yeah. If you're doing that, just convert from Plague Monks is the answer.
Yeah. I mean, yes. Like, it's just hooded rats with a slightly different kit out, right? So whatever. I would also point out that the Plague Monks sprues.
Yes.
Come with the tiny
little baby monks.
Little baby monks, which are like, no joke, some of the cutest little tiny models they've ever made. They're little baby Skaven stabbers. They have like little knives. I don't know what they are. I don't know what the purpose of them are. I guess just like
it's an amazing kit.
Decoration. I have no idea what the purpose of that tiny little rat is.
I would put if I do that, I'm gonna put a whole horde of them around my plague furnace.
Sure. That's like, also that would be awesome to see somebody with a unit of 40 of those, like make those their Plague Monks, still of course legal size bases, right?
Yeah,
but just the tiny little stabber monks
Sure.
as their plague monks. So, all right, but anyway, there you go. That's Pestilens. It's just yeah, good to cover these guys. I agree with you. I think they're a hidden gem.
Yeah.
As far as what their capabilities are, and I would be, I like you said. I know you said Domus was playing around with them. I'll be interesting to see if some other people do give them a shot and what their experiences with them are.
Yeah, and like I didn't go into the fact that they get Nurgle allies,
Right.
like Nurgles of like demons of Nurgle.
Yep.
So realistically, like you could pull in like a block of 30 plague bearers to
Right.
be an objective point sitter. Like that's well under 300 points. It's 270, and still add other things.
Right.
And so, or with the Vermin Lord Corruptor, you could summon in Nurgle demons if you left a reserve open.
Right. Yep.
So there's some real potential here, is what I would say.
I agree. Well, there you go. That's the gross, disgusting, warp fog infused Clan Pestilens. So, like I said to everybody, I apologize. We were late this week. This was a ridiculous week. I am absolutely exhausted, but I'm glad we got this fun show in. I hope you found it not. Oh my God, Tom, do a louder thing at the end.
Sorry.
All right. So I hope everybody still managed to at least find this mildly entertaining enough to have it on in the background and get some models painted. As always, that's our goal. As long as we have achieved white noise in the background while you're painting, we've succeeded. But seriously, thank you everybody for watching very much. We certainly appreciate it, especially for all the people who are watching live at this very late hour, or perhaps it's early where you are across the world. Appreciate it. And as always, we'll see you next Wednesday.